The sound of my brother's voice, loud and smug from the living room, made me freeze with my hand on my bedroom doorknob. I had just gotten home from another long, tedious day at the law firm, my shoulders aching from hunching over case files and my eyes tired from staring at a computer screen for hours on end. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but the walls in our shared apartment were thin, and he was practically shouting into his phone, his tone dripping with a triumph that immediately put me on edge. He only used that particular tone when he had successfully manipulated a situation to his advantage, and it always spelled trouble for someone else, usually me or our parents. 2000. Clean, he said, and I could perfectly picture his wide, self-satisfied grin, the one he always wore when he thought he'd pulled a fast one on the world. Yeah, some idiot online paid way more, but the auction house takes a huge cut. Still easy money. No one will even miss it. My heart didn't just skip a beat. It felt like it stopped completely, a cold, hard stone in my chest. A wave of cold dread washed over me, followed immediately by a scalding rush of hot, sharp understanding. He had actually done it. The vague, nagging worry I'd felt for days, the feeling that something was off, crystallized into a horrifying certainty. He had sold Nana's vase. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood of my door, my fingers tightening on the knob until my knuckles turned white and ached. All I could think was, he stole from me. He went into my room, into my closet, and he stole a piece of our family, and he's proud of it. The betrayal was a physical ache, a heavy, sour weight in my stomach that made me feel sick. I stayed there, silent and unmoving in the dim hallway, listening to him brag about his deception to some faceless friend, and I knew my world, and my understanding of my own family, had just shifted on its axis forever. My name is Chloe. The vase wasn't just some old thing from a dusty attic, forgotten and unused. It was my grandmother's most treasured possession, a beautiful, delicate piece of art that had captivated me since I was a little girl. I would sit on the floor by her fireplace for hours, just staring at it, getting lost in the tiny, perfect details. It was a deep, rich cobalt blue, and painted on its surface in shimmering gold were scenes of elegant birds and intricate flowers, a whole secret garden captured on porcelain. She had told me stories about it, how it had come over from Europe with her own grandmother, surviving wars and journeys across the ocean. It was a survivor just like she was. She had given it to me on her deathbed, just the two of us in that quiet, sunlit room that smelled of medicine and lavender. Her hand, thin and veined with age, had held mine with a strength that surprised me. "This is for you, my Chloe," she had whispered, her voice a soft, papery rustle. "It's more than porcelain. It holds our family's story. Your story. It's seen joy and sorrow, and it has always endured. Keep it safe. Promise me." I had promised, my 10-year-old heart swelling with the importance of the moment, tears streaming down my cheeks. I kept it in my locked bedroom closet, wrapped carefully in a soft old blanket, a secret treasure I would take out on quiet evenings just to remember her, to feel the cool, smooth surface and feel connected to our history, to her. It was my most sacred belonging, a tangible piece of her love. My brother Todd was 3 years older than me and had always been treated like a prince in our family, the golden boy who could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. He was handsome, with a quick, disarming smile, and he could be incredibly charming when he wanted something, which was usually money or a way out of trouble. But underneath that charm he was reckless, selfish, and utterly irresponsible. He had blown through the small inheritance our grandmother left him on what he called can't-lose business ventures and fancy vacations, returning home each time with empty pockets and a new, elaborate story about how he had almost made it big. I, on the other hand, had always been the careful one, the planner. I worked a steady, unglamorous job as a paralegal, saved my money diligently, and planned for a secure future. My parents always made excuses for Todd. "Chloe, be understanding," my mom would say, her voice weary. "He's your brother, he's family. He just needs to find his way." My dad would just sigh and shake his head, a silent admission of defeat. They never held him accountable, never let him face the full consequences of his actions. But this was different. This wasn't just another one of his financial messes for them to clean up. This was a direct and personal attack on me, a violent violation of the trust Nana had placed in me. It felt like a final, ugly declaration of war, and I knew with a cold certainty that this time I would not just stand by and be understanding. The initial shock and hurt, the sting of his betrayal, quickly burned away, replaced by a cold, clear fury that settled deep in my bones, hardening my resolve. I didn't cry. I didn't storm out of my room and scream at him, my voice cracking with emotion. That was what he would have expected. That was the kind of reaction our parents would have rushed to smooth over, to mediate, ultimately asking me to be the bigger person, to forgive and forget for the sake of family harmony. Instead, I felt a strange, powerful calm descend upon me, like the quiet in the eye of a hurricane. This calm was more frightening than any anger I had ever felt. It was purposeful and sharp. I walked slowly, deliberately to my desk, sat down in my worn office chair, and opened my laptop. The pale glow of the screen illuminated my determined face in the dim room, shadows gathering in the corners. Revenge, I decided right then and there, would not be a loud, emotional explosion that left a mess for others to clean. It would be silent. It would be smart. It would be meticulously planned and perfectly executed. A checkmate he would never see coming until it was far too late and the game was already over. I took a deep, steadying breath, my fingers poised over the keyboard, ready to begin my quiet, calculated counterattack. Took me less than 20 minutes to find it. My hands, which I expected to be trembling, were perfectly steady as I typed various search terms into the browser, my movements quick and efficient. Antique Meissen vase. Blue porcelain auction. Elite Estates collectibles. My heart gave a painful lurching thud as the image loaded on the screen. There it was. Nana's vase, looking just as beautiful and serene as I remembered, photographed against a plain black background to highlight its beauty and make it look even more valuable. The listing was from Elite Estates Auctions, and the description was brief and clinical. Finely painted 19th C Meissen vase. Excellent condition. Minor wear consistent with age. The starting bid was set at $1,800. I stared at it, a mix of white-hot anger and profound sorrow swirling inside me. This was my property, my history, my promise to my grandmother, put up for sale like a common commodity by my own thief of a brother. He had taken something precious and sacred, something that represented generations of our family, and he had turned it into a quick cash grab, a solution to one of his many stupid problems. Seeing it there, displayed for strangers to gawk at and bid on, solidified my resolve into something unbreakable, as hard and cool as the porcelain itself. I would get it back, no matter the cost. The first step was creating a new, untraceable identity online. I needed to be a ghost, a phantom bidder that Todd could never connect to his quiet, predictable sister. I created a new, anonymous email address, and after a moment's thought, I used our grandmother's name, eleanortibbs@mail.com. It felt right, poetic even, like she was watching over my shoulder, guiding my hand, approving of my mission to reclaim what was ours, to protect our shared history from his greed. Next, I had to fund this operation. I logged into my personal banking app and looked at my savings account. The number represented years of sacrifice. Brown bag lunches, skipped vacations, second-hand clothes, all earmarked for a down payment on my own apartment one day, a place that would truly be mine. Without a second thought, without even a twinge of regret, I transferred $10,000 into a new account linked to the auction site. This money wasn't for a dream home anymore. It was for justice. It was to honor a promise I made to my grandmother. It was to prove to myself that I was no longer the powerless little sister. It was, I knew, the most important and meaningful purchase I would ever make. The auction was scheduled to end on Friday night at 9:03 p.m. When the time came, I sat alone in my dark bedroom, the only light coming from my laptop screen, casting long blue-tinged shadows across the walls. The digital clock in the corner of the auction site ticked down the final minutes and seconds with a relentless, silent pulse. My palms were a little sweaty, and I could feel my own heartbeat thrumming in my ears, but my mind was clear and focused, locked on the single goal. I could see the current high bidder was someone with the username Antique Hunter 22. They had bid $4,000. That had to be Todd's buyer, the one he was talking to on the phone, the one who was going to give him his clean $2,000. I imagined Todd sitting in the living room, probably with a beer, watching the same screen, eagerly awaiting his payday, completely confident in his easy score. My finger rested lightly on the mouse, the cursor hovering over the bid button. The hunt was on, and for the first time I was the predator, not the prey. The quiet in my room was a stark contrast to the frantic energy I knew was building on the other side of my door. At exactly 9:02 p.m., with only 1 minute left in the auction, the time when serious bidders make their move, I entered the fight. I typed in $5,000, a significant jump, and clicked bid. The screen refreshed with an agonizing slowness, and then my new bid, under the name Eleanor Tibbs, was now the highest. From the living room I heard a sharp, frustrated gasp, followed by a muttered curse. It was Todd. He was watching, just as I suspected, probably with his phone in his hand, ready to celebrate and already counting the money in his head. Almost immediately, Antique Hunter 22 shot back with a bid of $5,500, not willing to give up so easily on such a fine piece. A slow, thin smile spread across my lips, a smile devoid of any warmth. He was panicking. His easy money was suddenly getting harder to get. He had no idea who he was really bidding against. He thought it was just some random stranger with deep pockets, not the very person he had stolen from, the ghost of the grandmother he had disrespected. The game was truly afoot, and though he didn't know it, I held all the cards. The next 60 seconds were a frantic, digital whirlwind. The numbers on the screen began to climb rapidly as Antique Hunter 22 and I, Eleanor Tibbs, engaged in a silent, furious battle for the vase. 6,200 was. Then 7,000. My bid. 7,800. The clock was a blur of red numbers, each second feeling shorter than the last. With only 10 seconds left on the clock, my opponent placed a final, desperate bid of $8,000. A round, impressive number they must have hoped would seal the deal and scare me off. I could almost feel Todd's greedy excitement radiating through the wall, a palpable wave of anticipation. He thought he had won. He thought his payday was secure. But I was not done. My fingers flew across the keyboard, calm and precise. With a mere 3 seconds remaining, the site's final buffer, I typed in my final offer. $8,850. I didn't hesitate. I took a deep breath and clicked bid. The screen seemed to freeze for an eternity, the seconds stretching out impossibly long as the website processed my last second offer. Then it flashed. A bright, triumphant, almost garish message appeared. Congratulations, NORTIBBS. You are the winning bidder. A wave of pure, unadulterated relief and victory so potent it made me light-headed washed over me. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding, a long, shaky sigh that released all the tension from my body. I had done it. I had just bought back my own soul, my grandmother's legacy, my family's story, for $8,850. From the living room, there was a moment of dead, stunned silence, followed by a frustrated, guttural roar of anger that was almost animalistic. I heard something slam against a wall, probably a pillow or a magazine, thrown in a fit of pique. I closed my laptop slowly, the soft, final click sounding like a period at the end of a perfectly crafted sentence. The first part of my plan was complete. I had won the battle, and soon I would win the war. The silence in my room now felt peaceful, a reward for a job well done. A few days later, a large, heavy, and meticulously packed box arrived at a private mailbox I had rented for this exact purpose, under the name E. Tibbs. My hands trembled slightly as I used a box cutter to slice through the layers of thick tape and countless layers of bubble wrap, my anticipation growing with each layer I removed. The auction house had packaged it like a fortress, and for a moment, I felt a spike of fear that it might be damaged, that Todd's carelessness might have caused it harm in transit, that my victory would be a hollow one. Finally, after peeling away the last layer of soft, acid-free tissue paper, I saw it. The deep cobalt blue gleamed under the harsh fluorescent lights of the mailroom. I carefully, reverently lifted Nana's vase from its nest, feeling its familiar solid, cool weight in my hands. It was safe. It was whole. Not a single chip or crack. It was home. Tears I had been holding back for days, for weeks, finally streamed down my face, hot and silent. They were not tears of sadness, but of overwhelming relief and a fierce, protective love. I took it back to my apartment, cradling it in my arms like a baby, and placed it proudly on my dresser, in the spot I had already cleared for it, where the morning sun could catch the gold filigree and make it sparkle. It was back where it belonged, with me. The following Sunday, we had our usual family dinner at my parents' house. The atmosphere was tense and thick with unspoken frustration the moment I walked in. Todd was slouched on the couch, staring blankly at the television, a black hole of resentment and bad mood. He barely grunted a hello in my direction, his entire body radiating displeasure. Throughout the meal, he was sullen and quiet, pushing his food around his plate, until my dad, trying to make conversation, asked him how work was going. That was all the invitation Todd needed. He launched into his tale of woe. "You won't believe what happened," Todd seethed, stabbing a piece of potato with his fork with unnecessary force. "I had a sure thing lined up, a huge sale with a solid buyer. But some rich, bored jerk outbid my guy at the very last second. A literal second. I lost nearly $7,000 in profit because of it." Profit. He actually called it profit, as if he had manufactured the item himself, as if he had any right to it at all. He was talking about the money he would have made from selling something he stole from me, from his own sister. The sheer audacity, the complete lack of remorse, took my breath away and made the food in my mouth taste like ash. My mom immediately clucked her tongue in sympathy, her face a mask of concern for her poor, unlucky son. "Oh, Todd, what awful luck," she said, passing him the gravy boat as if an extra helping of gravy could soothe his wounded pride and fill the financial hole he'd dug. My dad just shook his head, his expression one of weary resignation. "The market's unpredictable, son. You win some, you lose some. Can't get too worked up about it." Not a single one of them asked the obvious question. "What were you selling?" Not a flicker of suspicion crossed their faces about where this mysterious, suddenly appearing valuable item had come from. They just accepted his story at face value, absorbed his frustration, and felt sorry for his loss. I sat there, silently pushing my green beans around my plate, feeling the familiar heavy ache of invisibility settle in my chest like a lead weight. I was always the afterthought, the reliable, quiet one who didn't cause problems or demand attention. Their reaction, while not surprising, still stung with a fresh, sharp pain. It confirmed that in this family, Todd's narrative was the only one that mattered. I took a slow, deliberate bite of my roast chicken, chewing carefully, and said absolutely nothing. I just watched him. I watched him squirm in his seat, his face twisted in genuine anger and self-pity. He had no idea that the person who had ruined his brilliant plan was sitting right across the table from him, calmly eating her Sunday dinner. The power of that knowledge was intoxicating, a secret shield that protected me from their collective disappointment. It was a sweet, private victory in the midst of their shared frustration. I held all the cards, the vase, the receipt, the undeniable truth, and he was blindly playing a losing hand, complaining loudly about the dealer. I met his eyes for a brief, charged second and gave him a small, neutral, almost polite smile. He just scowled, his brow furrowing in confusion at my expression, and looked away, completely and utterly oblivious to the storm that was quietly gathering around him. The normal sounds of dinner, the clinking of cutlery, the murmur of conversation, felt hollow and distant to me. Over the next month, the tension in our shared apartment grew thicker, becoming a palpable thing you could almost taste in the air, like the static before a lightning storm. Todd became more desperate, more short-tempered, and his phone conversations, which he still thought were private, took on a frantic, pleading tone. I overheard him on the phone late one night, his voice a hushed, urgent whisper. "I just need 2 more weeks, I promise. Just a little more time. Something came up, a deal fell through at the last minute." The consequences of his failed profit were clearly closing in on him, the walls of his own making starting to press in. Whatever debt he was in, whether it was to a loan shark or just a string of maxed-out credit cards, he was sinking deeper. He started borrowing small but significant amounts of money from our parents, always with a vague, convoluted story about a temporary cash flow problem or a can't-miss investment opportunity. They gave it to him, of course, each time with a sigh and a worried glance. Meanwhile, I stayed quiet, a silent observer in my own home, biding my time, knowing that his house of cards was becoming increasingly unstable and was about to collapse all on its own, without me needing to lift a finger. While Todd was flailing and drowning in the consequences of his own actions, my own life was moving forward in a positive, steady way. The silent victory with the vase had given me a new, unshakable confidence. It proved I could take control of a situation, that I didn't have to be a victim. I channeled that energy into my work, taking on more complex cases and staying late to ensure everything was perfect, my dedication finally being noticed by the senior partners. My hard work paid off. I was called into the senior partner's office and given a promotion, which came with a significant raise and my own small office with a window overlooking the city. With my new salary and my careful, disciplined savings, I was able to finalize the lease on a beautiful, sun-drenched one-bedroom apartment across town. It was on the top floor with a view of the park and it was all my own. Every time I looked at Nana's vase, sitting proudly on my new dresser in this new space, I felt a surge of her strength and love. It reminded me that I was building my own life, a stable, honest and happy one, brick by brick, not just endlessly cleaning up the messy, chaotic spills that Todd left behind. I was moving out and I was moving up, leaving the toxicity behind for good. The summons came about 6 weeks after the auction, on a Tuesday evening. It was my mother on the phone, and her voice was thick with tears and a barely suppressed panic. "Chloe, honey, we need to have a family meeting. Tonight if you can. It's about Todd. It's serious." I agreed calmly, my heart beating a steady, confident rhythm in my chest. I had been waiting for this call, expecting it. I knew his growing desperation would eventually lead him back to our parents, sobbing and full of excuses, and I knew their default solution, their only tool, would eventually lead them to me, the financially responsible one. The stage was now set for the final act of my play. I was no longer the quiet, supportive sister in the background. I was about to step into the spotlight and become the lead character in my own story, and I was ready for my closing argument. I took my time getting ready, choosing my clothes carefully, wanting to project an image of unshakable composure and success. The air in my parents' living room the next evening was heavy and suffocating, smelling of old coffee, my mother's perfume, and a thick layer of anxiety. Todd was slumped in my dad's favorite worn leather armchair, his head in his hands, playing the part of the utterly remorseful and overwhelmed son perfectly. My mom was perched on the edge of the sofa, as if ready to bolt, nervously twisting a shredded tissue in her hands. My father stood by the cold, empty fireplace, his expression grim, his shoulders slumped with a weight I hadn't seen before. I sat down calmly in a single straight-backed chair, feeling strangely detached from the drama unfolding around me, like an anthropologist observing a strange ritual. My father cleared his throat, the sound rough and uncomfortable in the quiet room. "Chloe," he began, his voice tired and defeated. "Thank you for coming. Your brother has made some very unfortunate mistakes. He owes a substantial debt to some associates." He couldn't even bring himself to say what kind of associates, but the way he said the word implied something shady, something dangerous, and the fear in my mother's eyes confirmed it. "It's $15,000, my mother blurted out, unable to contain the terrifying number any longer. She looked at me, her eyes wide and pleading, swimming with tears. "We've given him what we can, but it's not enough. We've even taken a small loan against the house. We thought, well, your inheritance from Nana and the money you've saved, it's just sitting there, isn't it? You're so good with your money, so sensible. You could be a lifesaver here. You could save your brother from a very bad situation. He'll pay you back, of course. Every single penny. We'll make sure of it." There it was. The ultimate ask laid bare. The final, undeniable testament to their twisted, enabling priorities. They knew I had savings, money I had worked for, sacrificed for, and their first and only instinct was to hand it over to Todd to fix another one of his disastrous, self-inflicted crises. They didn't ask if I needed it for my own life, for my new apartment. They didn't consider the principle of it. They just assumed I would give it, that it was my role as the good daughter to fix the problems of the prodigal son. I looked slowly at each of them. My father's guilty, averted gaze, my mother's begging, desperate eyes, Todd's performance of despair. The room was silent, waiting for my answer, expecting my compliance. I could feel the pressure of their expectation like a physical force. I reached for the glass of water my mother had placed for me on the side table. I took a slow, deliberate sip, the cool liquid soothing my suddenly dry throat. I placed the glass back down on the coaster with a quiet yet definitive click that sounded like a gunshot in the hush. "No," I said, my voice clear, steady, and unwavering, echoing in the tense, silent room. "I won't." The word hung in the air between us, simple, absolute, and utterly foreign in this context. My mother gasped softly, her hand flying to her heart. My father's mouth fell open in pure, unadulterated shock. They had been so sure, so certain that I would agree, that I would be the family peacemaker once again, the one to absorb the shock of Todd's mistakes to maintain the fragile family peace. Todd's head snapped up. The fake sadness was gone in an instant, wiped away and replaced by pure, unadulterated fury. His face contorted, his eyes narrowing to slits. "What do you mean, no?" he snarled, his voice low and dangerous, dripping with venom. I met his glare without flinching, my own gaze cool and steady. I placed my hands calmly in my lap, a picture of composure. "I mean, I am not going to fund the consequences of your theft," I said, my tone even, cold and precise, like a judge delivering a verdict. "Especially not after you failed to profit from selling my property." The word theft landed in the room like a live wire, shocking everyone. My father's brow furrowed in deep confusion. "Theft? What property? What is she talking about, Todd?" Todd jumped to his feet, his face turning a blotchy, furious red. He pointed a shaking finger at me. "She's lying. She's crazy. She's making up stories because she's selfish and greedy and doesn't want to help her own family. She's always been jealous of me." I remained perfectly, infuriatingly calm. He was unraveling, and I was the one holding the thread. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. The screen was a weapon, and I knew how to use it. "I have the auction receipt right here," I said, my thumb hovering over the screen. I spoke calmly, as if explaining a simple legal point. "The winning bidder was Eleanor Tibbs. That was me. I have the bank transfer records. I have the confirmation email from Elite Estates." I tapped the screen a few times, pulling up the photo gallery. "And I have a photo of the property in question, safe and sound in my new apartment where it belongs. Would you like to see it? The evidence is quite clear." I didn't wait for their stammered permission. I turned the phone around slowly, making sure all three of them had a perfect, unobstructed view. The screen showed a crystal-clear, high-resolution picture of Nana's magnificent blue vase, standing proudly and serenely on my dresser, with a bright, sunny window of my new, independent apartment clearly visible in the background. My mother let out a choked, strangled cry, a raw sound of pain and disbelief, her hand flying to her mouth as if to physically stop the truth from escaping. Her eyes widened in horror as she stared at the image, the reality of what her son had done crashing down on her. My father's face completely collapsed, all the color draining away to a sickly gray as the truth slammed into him with the force of a freight train. The puzzle pieces were finally, horrifyingly, fitting together in his mind. Todd's sudden windfall, his mysterious sure-thing sale, his anger at being outbid, my strange calmness, my refusal to help. The truth was a bomb, and my phone was the detonator. It had just exploded in the middle of their neatly constructed living room, shattering their carefully maintained image of their golden boy into a million irreparable pieces. Todd stared, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water, all his bluster and fury evaporating into stunned, silent horror. He had been so sure his secret was safe, so confident in his own cleverness. "You," he finally stammered, his voice a hoarse croak, pointing a shaking, accusatory finger at me. His eyes were wide with a mixture of dawning horror and impotent rage. "It was you. All along it was you. You were the one who outbid me. You ruined me." I stood up smoothly, collecting my purse from the floor beside my chair. I looked him directly in the eye, my expression one of cold, final judgment. "I bought back what you stole," I said, my voice like ice, each word sharp and clear. "You didn't just lose a profit, Todd. You lost any last shred of my trust. You betrayed our grandmother's memory. And you showed Mom and Dad exactly who you are. Thief and a liar. You did this to yourself. Every single bit of it." I turned my back on his sputtering, incoherent protests and my mother's quiet, heartbroken sobs. There was nothing left to say. The truth had done all the talking for me. I walked out of their house, out of that museum of denial and enabling, and closed the front door firmly, finally behind me. The sound of the latch clicking shut was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. The cool evening air felt like freedom on my skin, clean and new. I took a deep, cleansing breath, filling my lungs with it, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders that I had carried for years. I didn't need their approval anymore. I didn't need to be the understanding, forgiving daughter. I had my heirloom, a beautiful, tangible piece of my grandmother's love and strength. I had my new home, a peaceful, sunny sanctuary that was all my own, a testament to my own hard work. And I had my integrity, intact and unbroken, polished now and stronger than ever. Their golden boy was finally irrevocably exposed for what he was, a small, dishonest man, and I, the overlooked, reliable daughter, had won. I had won back my history, I had won my independence, and most importantly, I had won my own self-respect. I got into my car and drove away from that street, from that life, and I never ever looked back. The road ahead was mine alone, and it was bright with possibility.